get some answers now with Brandon Krisztal, somebody we know well. He's out there in Denver, Sports Radio 760. Maybe this isn't the most conventional first question here. I don't know that anybody's really asked this. At least Tiki and I haven't kicked it around. But given the way the quarterback battle has played out, any remorse over not getting the Osweiler deal done, do you think, internally for the Broncos?
I think there's remorse with John Elway because Brock was John's guy. Brock was roommates with John's son Jack at Arizona State. And dating back to that draft, I don't think people realize, or looking back on it now, had they not got Peyton Manning, Tim Tebow would have been in a quarterback competition with somebody. And while there's obviously plenty of reason to like Russell Wilson, they weren't going to get Andrew Luck or RG3. But when you look at guys like Nick Foles and Kirk Cousins, the other guys in that draft, John Elway had circled Brock Osweiler as his guy. And so there's also people out there that will tell you John wasn't necessarily in favor of pulling Brock for Peyton Manning when Gary Kubiak made that move in the San Diego game. 4 of those 5 turnovers that occurred between the first half and early in the second half, only one of them was Brock's fault. The other 4 were on receivers and running backs. So I think John wanted to have Brock here. That was the idea. But Brock and his agent and maybe his wife felt a little insulted by how everything played out and the way the negotiation went down. I don't think a lot of people realize this, guys. They asked the Broncos, what's your best offer? And the Broncos said 4 years, $64 million, 31 guaranteed. The Texans then made their offer, which is the one he took, and Jimmy Sexton called the Broncos back and said, okay, thank you, we're going to go with the Texans, rather than giving John Elway and the Broncos a chance to match the Texans' offer or even better it. So I think there's certainly remorse on John Elway's part. Now, if Brock Osweiler doesn't play well, I guess it won't really matter, and they were going to trade for Colin Kaepernick. That may not matter either, but somebody's got to play quarterback. BT, I don't know how many throws you have left, or Tiki, if you want to change positions and come out of retirement, but you can't be much worse than what we saw Saturday night, at least in certain parts.
Yeah, no, it really looked bad, and especially from a turnover perspective. Now, Paxton Lynch had one, but it was late. It was kind of desperation. Regardless of who starts at quarterback for the time being, let's put that conversation on hold for 2 seconds. Is this defense as good as it was last year, Brandon?
You know, it's funny. People make a big deal about the losses, and Malik Jackson got a lot of money to go to Jacksonville. If they would have offered him the same deal they offered Derek Wolfe, they might still have both those guys at around $8 million, but he got double that in Jacksonville. Danny Trevathan was the leading tackler just ahead of Brandon Marshall. He's in Chicago now, and David Bruton, the dime safety, if you will, is in D.C. But that means 11 of their top 14 guys are back, plus Shane Ray will be in the rotation a little bit more. So really 12 of your top 15 or 16 guys are back. And I think they will be as good. You're going to see less DeMarcus Ware. I mean, he hasn't even practiced yet. They think he'll be out there sometime maybe as early as tomorrow, but they're not counting on him until obvious pass rush situations. But Von Miller is what we saw in the Super Bowl. He's going to be the best edge rusher in the league, or right at the top of that list. Secondary is the best secondary in the league, and they work in concert together. If one of those guys is if there's no Von Miller or the pass rush in there, you aren't going to be able to cover for 7 seconds no matter how good you are. But they're going to be really good, and Brandon Marshall's going to lead them in tackles, and he may have upwards of 120 tackles. And up front, they lose Vance Walker, but they just signed Henry Melton. They like Derek Wolfe. They like this kid, Adam Gotts, it's their second-round pick out of Georgia Tech. He tore his knee against Florida State October 24th, and he's already back. He's been full go pretty much since the second week of camp. They're bringing him along slowly, but the kid's just a beast physically. He's a rugby player from Australia. And so their defense, they are saying they want to be the best defense of all time. I'm not really sure how you quantify that, but they're going to keep them in a lot of games, which is going to help with this questionable quarterback play.
Yeah, and obviously the schedule is what it is. I mean, the NFL's tough no matter where you start or who you start with, but it doesn't help when you start against the Panthers, who are outstanding on defense. You know, weak Colts in week 2, a little soft on D, but obviously something to prove here. And then back-to-back roadies at Cincy, a very good team, and a Tampa team that I think we all expect a renaissance from. And I hate to keep going for the low-hanging fruit here, but we've seen quarterback issues derail many teams here. Did we rule out a trade? Has that point expired, whether it's Mike Glennon or somebody? I mean, is there any chance that they pick up the phone and try to get a trade before the season starts?
Well, I don't think it's totally out of the realm of possibility. There's a reason guys are available. I mean, is Mike Glennon a huge upgrade over Mark Sanchez and Trevor Siemian, or is he just going to be wearing a different jersey number?
Yeah. I don't know.
I think that's where they're at. But how about this? And we went through this week before last out at training camp, and we were out there every day during the week that they'd let us broadcast. And John Elway actually sat down, and I do the show with Dave Logan every day, and we were talking. The Broncos, by our count, are the first team in the history of the NFL to have more interceptions than touchdown passes. Peyton and Brock combined for 19 touchdown passes and 21 picks.
Wow.
And no team's ever done that. Even the 07 Giants with Eli there, he was still just a little bit better. Joe Namath, and I don't know if you guys know this, Joe Namath has more career interceptions.
I'm offended. I'm offended by.
Okay.
I'm offended by the question.
Sorry,
yes.
Okay,
Well,
continue.
it's not like you watched it live.
I didn't, but I know my
even-
Jets history.
Even the year that Joe Namath led your Jets to the Super Bowl,
Yeah.
they were 21-20 for touchdowns and interceptions. So, and Elway sat down with us and we asked him. He goes, the one thing they looked at was quarterback rating. That's why he tipped us off on the 07 Giants. But even teams, I mean, Brett Favre, the all-time leader in interceptions, the year they won it, he was like 38 and 12 or something, or 30. So it's pretty remarkable. The quarterback play was as bad as it was, and I think the stars needed to align for them to obviously come away not just with the Lombardi Trophy, but the road there where they had home field. Pittsburgh played with Antonio Brown. They just flat out beat New England, which doesn't win in Denver very often. But a ball bounces one way or another. You can probably make that case every year with Super Bowl champs. I mean, if the Seahawks run the ball 2 years ago, then they have back-to-back titles, and Tom Brady's still sitting on 3 rings. But I think the defense will keep them in games. But you're right, quarterback play can derail a team, but also help. I mean, they started the same 11 guys in the Super Bowl that were penciled in as starters on day one. Derek Wolfe was suspended, but he wasn't injured.
Yep.
So the same 11 guys that started Super Bowl 50 were the 11 starters heading in to the season on defense. And so just to think that you'll stay that healthy, that's going to be a huge question mark.
Yeah, that's a great point and underrated aspect of success in the National Football League.
Yeah.
It's a game of attrition.
Brandon Krisztal with us here, Tiki and Tierney, of course, reporter, Denver Sports 760.
Brandon, do you think that Paxton Lynch will get some run with the number ones?
Well, based on what we've seen, if it's still an open competition, they may have to let him. I mean, there's plenty of thinking out there that whether it's Mark Sanchez, Trevor Siemian, that Gary's got to name a starter pretty much today so that when they get back on the field tomorrow, they're starting to get their first unit a look with whoever their guy's going to be, and even if that guy's going to have a short leash. But if it's still an open competition, which is what Gary said after the game Saturday night, well, then I guess you got to give Paxton some work with the ones, because while he's looked good and you see flashes and you realize he's pretty mobile at that size, at 6'6.5", 6'7", and he's got a big arm, you want to see him go ones versus ones, because having some success against threes, well, that's great and all, but you're not going to see
you're
stringers out
supposed
there
to
too often.
Yeah,
and
you're supposed
the
to.
Bears and the Niners.
Yeah, exactly. You're supposed to have success against the threes if you're an above-average guy. Who do you ultimately think wins the competition?
I think it's going to be Mark Sanchez on September 8th, but I think his leash will be extremely short. And I thought the way he went in there, he threw a really good pass to Cody Latimer, and I actually tweeted, I'm like, he's going to carve up this second-team defense. But his awareness in the pocket and understanding where the pressure was coming from obviously affected him on the one fumble. The other fumble may have not been his fault, but Trevor Siemian was ready to go get the job, too, on the scripted drive, which is obviously what they do around here with Gary Kubiak and Mike Shanahan before him, and I believe it goes all the way back to Bill Walsh. But last year, both Peyton Manning and Brock Osweiler in the preseason on scripted drives looked good, and even during the regular season. And so Trevor Siemian fell into that. So did Mark Sanchez last week in Chicago. It's once you get past the scripted plays, and you got to go out and make plays. Trevor makes a really bad decision trying to throw Demaryius Thomas a slant route. You saw Eric Reed pick it easily. I mean, Eric Reed's probably never had as easy an interception in his life. It looked like Larry Brown in the Super Bowl. He walked into the end zone 41 yards. So I think it's going to be Mark Sanchez, but he will have an extremely short leash.
Yeah, I think so as well. One last question before we let you go, Brandon. This is from the running back position. Is Ronnie Hillman in danger of getting released because of how good Devontae Booker's looked?
Yeah, and because Ronnie Hillman hasn't looked great, I think they're trying to showcase him, and you'll probably see him a little bit more on Saturday and maybe less Booker. Not that they don't want to get Booker some reps, or maybe less C.J. Anderson. It felt like they gave C.J. 2 or 3 carries too many. Once he had a touchdown on the first drive, I don't think they even needed him back out there, but they gave him the ball a couple more times. I think they're trying to trade Ronnie Hillman if somebody needs him, and they'll take a 6th or a 7th, but he was on the open market for, a month and a half, 2 months before he re-signed with the Broncos on a one-year deal that's going to pay him a little less than $2 million if he's here, and the signing bonus wasn't much. But as teams tend to lose guys at this time of the year, they might just look up and say, okay, he's a veteran guy who can pick up the blitz. It is a change of pace. And I think they wanted him to be better, but they'll live with C.J. Anderson and Devontae Booker and then use Capri Bibbs as the third guy when they need him. But, yeah, I think Ronnie Hillman's days in Denver are probably numbered, whether they just outright cut him at the end of camp or can work out a trade right around that time.
All righty, Krisztal. Good report, man. We'll talk to you soon. I know we'll be chatting during the season. Thanks, buddy.
Yeah. Hey, and I'm easier to get a hold of than Drew Brees, so just call me whenever.
You got
Appreciate you, BK.